In case you are unaware, Assassin's Creed has recently undergone a bit of a regime change. Guesdon was appointed as the new head of content for Assassin's Creed, putting him in charge of the overall creative direction of the series. He's also specifically taking up the creative director role for codename Hexe in place of Clint Hocking, who just recently left Ubisoft. And I was invited to a little virtual meet and greet with Jean and a bunch of other creators, where he talked about his journey with Assassin's Creed, his vision for it in the future, and we, the creators, got to express some things we'd like to see in Assassin's Creed's future. I have to admit, I was pretty nervous about this. Speaking to essentially the new leader of Assassin's Creed felt kinda daunting, and with how many people were in this meeting, creators and Ubisoft employees alike, made it feel like a bit of a nightmare for an introvert such as myself. It sort of felt like in school when the teacher's doing icebreakers with your class and each student in the room has to speak up and tell everybody about themselves. I don't know if you guys had to do that in school, but I always hated it. And this was basically that, but instead of random classmates, it was a bunch of creators I respected and people from Ubisoft, so it was a bit more intense. Let me tell you guys, public speaking and doing voiceover for YouTube videos are very different things. But I powered through it and got across some of the main things I want to see change or be improved in Assassin's Creed's future, which I'll get into in a minute. First, let's talk a little more about Guesdon and why his appointment as head of content makes me optimistic. For starters, he's an OG. He's been with the series from the very beginning, worked on the original game as a production coordinator, was a game designer for AC2, and then was made brand creative director assistant. He explained to us that he was basically Patrice Desile's assistant, helping him expand the franchise when he was still at Ubisoft. I've talked about Patrice quite a bit in past videos, but if you don't know, he was the creator of Assassin's Creed. Many of the core things we love about this series were his brainchild. He left Ubisoft after finishing his work on Brotherhood. I think his absence is still felt to this day for a lot of us AC fans, but the fact that— oh my god, there's a spider on my microphone. But the fact that the new head of content worked with Patrice himself is pretty neat. Jean was also most notably the creative director for Black Flag and Origins, two of the most popular AC games. I found what he had to say about those games in particular very interesting. He spoke a little about how he approached doing something new and fresh for the franchise, while keeping the core of what Assassin's Creed is about intact. He recalled how he had to explain to the Black Flag team how they were going to blend a pirate player fantasy with that of an assassin one, and how they were going to make an Assassin's Creed story for Origins that stayed true to the core themes of the franchise in a time that predated the Assassins and Templars. I'd say he and his teams certainly succeeded. Black Flag and Origins were seen as largely refreshing games for Assassin's Creed when they came out, and I think we're at a similar crossroads now, where Assassin's Creed needs a bit of a refresh. Regardless of what you feel about the RPG games, we've had 4 of them now. I think for a lot of people, the formula is starting to get pretty stale and overstay its welcome. I think we could really use our next Black Flag or Origins here. That's why codename Hexe is easily the Assassin's Creed project I'm most looking forward to. I think it has the potential to be that. We still don't have a lot of official information on it, a lot of what we know is from leaks, but it's supposed to be very narrative-driven with a dark, horror-esque tone, and it's going to be pretty different and unique in the scope of the franchise, which I think is what Assassin's Creed needs right now, especially the narrative-driven part. We need a good linear story, please. Again, I feel fairly optimistic about that being the case because Darby McDevitt is the game's lead writer. He wrote the stories for Revelations and Black Flag, often heralded as some of the 2 best narratives of the franchise. I'm excited to see what he can do with a more focused, linear story like those games, instead of what he had to do with Valhalla with this massive, non-linear story with a million different arcs. Clint Hocking was the game's creative director, emphasis on the was. I was excited about that too, because he basically made those old Splinter Cell games what they were. He was a huge part of the original Splinter Cell and was the creative director for Chaos Theory, one of, if not the best game Ubisoft has ever produced in my opinion. He also kind of made Far Cry what it is as the director of Far Cry 2. Yes, he did Watch Dogs Legion as well, which kind of tanked the series, but there were some creative, ambitious ideas in there even if they didn't pay off. And I found it very interesting that in all his time at Ubisoft, being one of their most renowned developers, he never worked on their biggest property, Assassin's Creed, until now. Or, that is, until he just left. I was definitely bummed to see that news, but he worked on the game for years already, so I have to imagine a lot of the work he did and what he wanted implemented is going to be in the game, and of all the people that could replace him, I think Jean Guesdon is the best possible outcome. Especially since he's now the creative head of the franchise and has helped refresh this series before, he can personally ensure it heads in the direction he wants it to. One of the big things he stressed to us in the meeting is that he'll be keeping the global big picture of the franchise in mind and wants Assassin's Creed to feel cohesive. A lot of other creators brought up to him that Assassin's Creed doesn't feel as cohesive as it used to, with games building and iterating upon each other. Again, you think back to the continuity of the Ezio trilogy or the Kenway games, where it felt like the titles were building upon previous features and mechanics and were still in some ways connected. Well, now it's inconsistent with what features and mechanics are brought forward or dropped in the new games. Somebody mentioned as an example how the new light and shadow stealth mechanics from Shadows should be carried forward in new titles, and I completely agree. Now, I only had a couple minutes to speak. I had made this whole list of things I wanted to bring to Jean's attention beforehand, but I very quickly realized I wasn't going to have time. So I advocated for 3 things I'd like to see in the future of the franchise that I felt like hadn't been touched upon yet in the meeting. The first had to do with storytelling. In my opinion, this is the biggest issue in Assassin's Creed right now. The narratives just aren't up to par with what they used to be in the series. I said I wanted linear narratives, I brought up the poor cutscene quality of the recent games in the series. Gameplay-wise, I expressed my desire to see social stealth back and be a focal point. I believe it's a core part of the Assassin gameplay fantasy, and it's a perfect example of how inconsistent recent Assassin's Creed can be between games, since we finally got social stealth back in Valhalla and Mirage, just to see it disappear again in Shadows. The third thing I advocated for had to do with the modern day. Some of the creators who spoke before me already brought up their displeasure with how the modern day was being handled and how they wanted to be more present in the games, which if you've watched my videos before, you'd know I'm in total agreement with. So I brought up something a little more specific. I said I wanted to see the continuation of Valhalla's modern day cliffhanger with Basim and Layla joining Desmond in the Grey. I still don't know if they're dropping that storyline or not. It kind of feels like they are, since Shadows' modern day with the Animus Hub felt like a complete reset with a new plot. There is a chance that it's picked up again in Hexe, especially since Darby McDevitt, who wrote that Valhalla modern day, is the lead writer for the game. But then, why would they introduce this new modern day storyline in Shadows just to go back to the one they were doing beforehand? I'm very concerned history is repeating itself from 10 years ago, when they decided to drop the Juno storyline they spent several games building. After Syndicate, they just resolved it in the Uprising comic series because they wanted a clean slate when soft rebooting with Origins. I really hope that's not what's going to happen with this storyline, but of course Jean couldn't tell me if that was or wasn't going to be the case. He listened to all my feedback and said, duly noted. So, I tried, guys. I put some of my wishes out there into the void. I have no idea if it'll make any difference at all. There's already so many games in development, I'm not sure what good some of that feedback will do for the ones already well underway. And Jean fully acknowledged that the Assassin's Creed community is very split on what we want. He's well aware there's a fanbase that prefers the RPGs and one that prefers the older action-adventure titles. I mean, in this meeting alone, we had a bit of that divide.
Jean, just ignore the RPG fans. Listen to us.
I'm kidding. Kind of. There was a lot more I wish I could have brought up. I mean, I would talk Jean's ear off for hours if given the chance. Hey, I'll pitch him my Arno, Connor, Shay, and Avalon game. I've made some revisions to my idea over the years for fun. Maybe I'll make an updated video on that sometime. Again, I'm optimistic about Jean's return to being a leader of the franchise. It's really cool that he was willing to do something like this and hear out someone like me. I don't think that's something the old leadership really did, or if it was, I wasn't invited. I have to give a thank you to you guys. When I started this channel, I certainly never expected to be giving feedback to the creative head of the franchise. If it weren't for you, Ubisoft would not care about what I have to say. It'd be like, who's this nerd complaining about cutscenes and social stealth? All that being said though, at this point with Assassin's Creed, I've taken an I'll believe it when I see it mindset. This change sounds good on paper. I think if there was anybody still at Ubisoft I'd want to be in charge of Assassin's Creed, it's Jean. But until we see some tangible results, I'm not shouting from the rooftops that Assassin's Creed is back. I will be on the rooftops though, of that you can be certain. How else am I supposed to keep tabs on all of you, making sure you're liking this video and subscribing? If you're not, then I'd have to assume you're a Templar agent, and I will do nothing about that. Okay, have a great day. Don't forget what I said, but have a great day. Alright, goodbye.